A single slip of the hand. That was all it took. 1 second, one mistake, one moment that should have ended everything. For 18-year-old Sarah Mitchell, it felt like the exact instant her future shattered. For Elvis Presley, it was the moment he quietly revealed who he really was when nobody expected greatness. And neither of them knew that before the morning was over, a spilled cup of coffee would trigger a chain of events that would change hundreds of lives for decades to come. Las Vegas, November 1960. The city never truly slept. Even after sunrise, the casinos hummed with life. Neon lights still flickered against the fading darkness. Taxi horns echoed through crowded streets. Tourists wandered through hotel lobbies with tired eyes after nights spent chasing luck that rarely came. The city was built on dreams. Some people arrived hopping to become rich. Others arrived hopping to become famous. Most left with neither. Inside the International Hotel restaurant, another busy morning had already begun. The smell of fresh coffee drifted through the air. Dishes clattered. Orders flew across the kitchen. Waitresses hurried between tables carrying trays stacked high with breakfast plates. Everything looked normal. But for Sarah Mitchell, nothing felt normal anymore. Because she was exhausted. Not ordinary tired. Not the kind of tired solved by a good night's sleep. This was deeper. The kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones. The kind that makes every step heavier than the last. She had worked 14 hours the day before. Then she'd gone home and spent half the night helping her youngest sister finish a school assignment. By the time she'd finally crawled into bed, the clock was already approaching midnight. 4 hours later, her alarm had dragged her back into reality. 4 hours. That was all she'd gotten. 4 miserable hours. Now she stood behind the restaurant counter, trying desperately to stay awake. Trying desperately not to think. Because thinking always led to the same painful place. The future she had lost. Just 6 months earlier, Sarah had been one of the brightest students in her graduating class. Teachers praised her. Friends admired her. She had plans. Big plans. She wanted to become a teacher. Not because teaching paid well. Not because it was glamorous. But because she genuinely loved learning. She loved watching people discover something new. She loved seeing children realize they were capable of more than they believed. And for years, she'd imagined herself standing in front of a classroom, helping others find confidence the way her own teachers had helped her. Then reality arrived. Cruel, cold, unforgiving. 2 years earlier, her father had died unexpectedly. The loss left more than grief behind. It left bills, responsibilities, fear. Her mother suddenly found herself raising 4 children alone while working as a seamstress. Money became a daily struggle. Every dollar mattered. Every meal mattered. Every utility bill felt like a crisis waiting to happen. Sarah still remembered hearing her mother cry late at night when she thought everyone else was asleep. She remembered pretending not to hear. Pretending everything was okay. But children always know. And Sarah knew. Which made what happened next even more painful. Because despite everything, she had earned acceptance into the University of Nevada. The letter sat hidden inside her dresser drawer. Sometimes she took it out just to read it again. Accepted. The word still hurt. A partial scholarship had covered some expenses. Not enough. Not even close. The remaining costs might as well have been $1 million. Tuition, books, housing, supplies. Each number felt like a wall she couldn't climb. Eventually, reality won. The dream died quietly. No dramatic speeches. No grand farewell. Just a young woman folding away her future and taking a job serving breakfast. Every morning, she told herself she'd stopped caring. Every morning, she lied. The restaurant doors opened. Cold air rushed inside. Sarah glanced up. Immediately, the atmosphere changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Several customers stared. The reason became obvious instantly. Elvis Presley had just entered the restaurant. Even now, decades later, it's difficult to explain exactly what Elvis represented in 1960. He wasn't merely famous. He wasn't simply successful. He was something larger. A cultural earthquake. A global phenomenon. People didn't react to Elvis. They reacted to the idea of Elvis. The legend. The myth. The man whose voice could make entire stadiums scream. The man whose face appeared on magazine covers around the world. The man millions dreamed of meeting. And now he was walking toward table 7. The restaurant manager appeared almost immediately. "Remember what I said," he warned the staff quietly. "No staring, no special treatment, act professional." Everyone nodded. Then something interesting happened. The veteran waitresses disappeared. Not literally, but suddenly they all found reasons to be elsewhere. One needed to check another section. Another needed to help in the kitchen. A third became strangely occupied with silverware. Nobody wanted the pressure. Nobody wanted responsibility for serving Elvis Presley. The manager scanned the room. His eyes landed on Sarah. "Mitchell." Sarah froze. "Sir." "Table 7. Her stomach instantly tightened. "No." The manager pointed. "Yes." A few co-workers looked at her sympathetically. One even whispered, "Good luck." The words sounded more like a warning than encouragement. Sarah swallowed hard. Of course it had to be her. The newest waitress. The least experienced waitress. The most exhausted waitress. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. She grabbed a coffee pot and forced herself forward. Each step felt heavier than the last. Don't embarrass yourself. Don't trip. Don't shake. Just survive. When she reached the table, Elvis looked up. For a brief moment, Sarah forgot how to breathe. Those famous blue eyes met hers. Then came the smile. The smile she'd seen countless times in newspapers and magazines. Only now it wasn't directed at a camera. It was directed at her. "Good morning," she managed. Her voice cracked slightly. "Wonderful. Fantastic start. Can I get you gentlemen some coffee?" "That sounds great," Elvis replied. His voice surprised her. Warm. Friendly. Normal. Not a trace of arrogance. Not a trace of impatience. Just kindness. The discovery confused her. Because people often became difficult when they gained fame. Yet the most famous man in the world sounded like someone's friendly neighbor. Sarah poured coffee carefully. Very carefully. Her hands trembled slightly. But she managed. No spills. No mistakes. No disasters. She took their breakfast order. Wrote everything down. Repeated it correctly. Then practically fled back toward the kitchen. The second she disappeared behind the swinging doors, one of the cooks laughed. "You look terrified." Sarah leaned against the counter. It's Elvis Presley. So, Sarah stared at him. So, yeah, that's Elvis Presley. The cook shrugged. Looks human to me. Sarah wasn't convinced. Humans didn't create worldwide hysteria. Humans didn't become legends before turning 30. Humans didn't change culture forever. Before she could argue further, the order bell rang. Breakfast ready. Her heart sank. Round 2. The real test. 3 plates. 1 tray. Simple. Easy. Routine. She'd carried hundreds of trays before. Maybe thousands. Nothing about this should have been difficult. Yet as she lifted the tray, a strange feeling settled into her chest. Anxiety. A warning. As if something terrible was waiting just ahead. She ignored it. Started walking. The restaurant noise faded into the background. Step. 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 Everything seemed fine. The tray remained balanced. The plates stayed steady. She approached table 7. Closer. Closer. Almost there. The first plate landed perfectly. No problem. The second plate followed. Still perfect. Relief began spreading through her body. Maybe she had worried for nothing. Maybe she'd survive this morning after all. Then came the final plate. Elvis's plate. Sarah leaned forward slightly. At that exact moment, exhaustion finally caught up with her. Not gradually. Not gently. All at once. Her foot clipped the leg of a chair. The tray shifted. And suddenly, the world slowed. Everything became silent. Everything became impossible. The coffee pot lifted into the air. Sarah watched in horror as dark liquid rose above Elvis's table. For one endless second, it seemed frozen. Suspended. Defying gravity. Giving her just enough time to understand exactly what was about to happen. No. Please no. Not this. Not him. Not today. Then gravity won. The entire pot of scalding coffee crashed directly onto Elvis Presley's bright white shirt. The stain spread instantly across his chest. Steam rose into the air. The restaurant fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Every movement stopped. Every eye turned toward table 7. And Sarah Mitchell felt her entire future collapse in a single heartbeat. Because at that moment, she was absolutely certain of one thing. She had just made the biggest mistake of her life. What she didn't know was that the next 20 minutes would change her destiny forever. The silence hit harder than a gunshot. 1 second earlier, the restaurant had been alive with conversation, clinking dishes, and laughter. Now it felt like a graveyard. Every head had turned. Every eye was fixed on table 7. And in the center of it all stood Sarah Mitchell. Frozen. Terrified. Destroyed. The empty coffee pot hung from her trembling hand. A thin trail of coffee dripped from its spout onto the floor. Dig. 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 Each drop sounded deafening. Across from her, Elvis Presley slowly looked down at his shirt. The bright white fabric was soaked. Dark brown stains spread across his chest like ink across paper. Steam curled upward. The coffee had been fresh. Hot. Painfully hot. Sarah's heart stopped. This is it. I'm finished. Her entire body began shaking. Not slightly. Violently. The tray slipped from her fingers and crashed onto the floor. The sound shattered the silence. Several customers flinched. Sarah couldn't breathe. couldn't think, couldn't move. Her mind raced ahead to everything she was about to lose. The paycheck, the rent money, the grocery money, the help her mother depended on, her younger brothers, her little sister. The future already felt impossible. Now even survival seemed out of reach. Oh God! The words escaped her lips as a whisper. Then louder. Oh God, I'm sorry. Her voice cracked. Tears immediately filled her eyes. I'm so sorry. Elvis rose from his chair. The coffee had soaked through the shirt and reached his skin. Sarah saw him pull the fabric away from his chest. A red mark was already beginning to form beneath it. The sight made her stomach drop even further. She had burned him. Actually burned him. The realization hit like a hammer. Suddenly, she was moving, grabbing napkins, fumbling, dropping half of them, trying desperately to clean a disaster that couldn't be cleaned. I'm sorry. Another napkin. I'm sorry. Another. I'm so sorry. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold them. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Customers watched in stunned silence. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked horrified. A few simply stared, watching a young woman's life collapse in real time. Then came the voice Sarah feared more than anything. Her manager, MITCHELL. The shout echoed across the restaurant. Several customers jumped. Sarah closed her eyes. There it is. The end. The manager stormed toward the table. His face was bright red. Veins bulged along his neck. His expression carried pure fury. What have you done? Sarah couldn't answer. Couldn't even find the words. I didn't mean to. His voice rose even higher. You poured boiling coffee all over Elvis Presley. Every customer could hear him now. Every employee. Every cook. Every dishwasher. The humiliation burned almost as much as the coffee. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered. The manager wasn't listening. His anger had already taken control. Weeks of frustration. Months of pressure. Years of bitterness. All of it exploded at once. You had one job. His finger stabbed toward her. One simple job. I'm sorry. You embarrassed this restaurant. I'm sorry. You embarrassed me. I'm sorry. Then came the words that truly broke her. You're fired. The world stopped. For a moment, Sarah genuinely thought she had imagined them. Her ears rang. Her vision blurred. The restaurant disappeared. All she could hear was that sentence. You're fired. 2 words. 2 simple words. Yet they felt like a death sentence. No. The whisper escaped before she could stop it. Please. The manager folded his arms. Get your things. Please. His face remained cold. I said you're done. The tears came harder now. Uncontrollably. Not because she was embarrassed. Not because she was humiliated. Because she was terrified. You don't understand. Her voice shook. My family needs this job. The manager didn't care. Should have thought about that before dumping coffee on our most important customer. Please. Customers looked away. Some couldn't bear watching. Others shook their heads sadly. The young waitress looked completely broken. And still the manager continued. Out. Please. No. Sarah felt her knees weaken. This couldn't be happening. Not like this. Not over one mistake. Not over one accident. She imagined going home, telling her mother, seeing the disappointment, seeing the fear, seeing the panic. How would they pay bills? How would they buy groceries? How would they survive? Everything she'd worked for was gone, destroyed in less than 10 seconds. Then something unexpected happened. A calm voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me." The manager stopped talking. The entire restaurant seemed to stop breathing. Because the voice belonged to Elvis Presley, he had remained silent until now. Watching, listening, observing everything. Now he stepped forward. Not dramatically, not aggressively, but with a quiet confidence that instantly changed the atmosphere. The manager's expression shifted immediately. His anger disappeared, replaced by nervous politeness. "Mr. Presley, I assure you, did you just fire her?" The question was calm, almost gentle, yet something underneath it made the manager uncomfortable. "Well, yes." The manager forced a smile. "I wanted to demonstrate that we take service very seriously." Elvis stared at him. For several long seconds, the smile vanished from the manager's face. The silence became unbearable. Then Elvis spoke. Slowly, carefully, "Because she spilled coffee." The manager laughed nervously. "Well, not exactly. Because that's what I saw." The restaurant grew even quieter. The manager shifted his weight. "Mr. Presley, she made a mistake." The words landed like stones. A bad mistake. Another pause. But still a mistake. The manager tried again. "She ruined your shirt." Elvis looked down, then back up. "It's a shirt." The manager blinked. "It's just a shirt." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Elvis took another step forward. "I can buy another shirt." The manager nodded quickly. "Of course. I can buy 100 shirts." "Yes, sir." 1,000 shirts. The manager swallowed. "Yes, sir." Elvis pointed toward Sarah. "But can she buy another life?" The question hit the room like thunder. Sarah looked up. The manager froze. Nobody had expected that. Nobody. Elvis continued. "Can she replace her future that easily?" The manager opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "Can she replace the money her family needs?" Still nothing. "Can she replace the opportunities she'll lose because one accident happened during one difficult morning?" The manager looked trapped, like a man slowly realizing he'd stepped into quicksand. Elvis's voice remained calm, but somehow that made it even more powerful. Because true authority doesn't need volume. True authority doesn't need shouting. Everyone in that room felt it, including Sarah. Especially Sarah. The manager tried one final time. "Mr. Presley, I simply thought." "That's the problem." Elvis interrupted. "You didn't." The words struck harder than yelling ever could. The manager visibly flinched. Elvis looked around the restaurant. At the customers. At the employees. At the cooks watching through the kitchen window. Then back at the manager. "Tell me something." His voice lowered. "When was the last time you made a mistake?" The manager said nothing. "When was the last time someone gave you another chance?" Still nothing. Elvis nodded slowly. Exactly. The room felt frozen. Every person present knew they were witnessing something special. Not because Elvis was famous, because he was right. Painfully right. Then he delivered the sentence nobody in that restaurant would ever forget. You see a waitress who spilled coffee. He pointed toward Sarah. I see a scared young woman who's terrified of losing everything. Sarah's breath caught. For the first time all morning, someone actually saw her. Not the accident. Not the embarrassment. Not the mistake. Her. And somehow that hurt even more. Because she hadn't realized how desperately she needed that. Elvis turned fully toward the manager. You're not firing her. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a request. It was a decision. The manager immediately understood. Everyone did. Of course, Mr. Presley. No. Elvis's eyes narrowed. Not because I said so. The manager blinked. Because it's the right thing to do. The words hung in the air. Heavy. Unavoidable. And for the first time that morning, Sarah felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. But she still had no idea that the most unbelievable part of this story hadn't even happened yet. Because in the next few minutes, Elvis Presley was about to ask a question that would uncover a dream Sarah had buried long ago. A dream he was already quietly preparing to bring back to life. For several seconds after Elvis spoke, nobody moved. Nobody dared. The manager stood frozen. The customers remained silent. Even the kitchen staff seemed afraid to make a sound. It was as if the entire restaurant had become trapped inside a single moment. A moment that somehow felt bigger than spilled coffee. Bigger than a stained shirt. Bigger than a frightened waitress standing on the edge of losing everything. Finally, the manager nodded. Quickly. Almost desperately. Of course, Mr. Presley. His voice had lost all its earlier confidence. She can stay. Elvis didn't immediately respond. Instead, he held the man's gaze for a few uncomfortable seconds. The silence stretched. The manager shifted nervously. Then Elvis finally spoke. Good. Just one word. But everyone in the room understood the conversation was over. The manager turned and disappeared as fast as his pride would allow. The second he was gone, the tension inside the restaurant seemed to break. People started breathing again. Conversations slowly returned. Dishes clinked. Life resumed. But for Sarah Mitchell, nothing would ever be normal again. She stood there trembling. Tears still streaked across her face. Her hands still shook. Yet somehow she was no longer terrified. Only overwhelmed. Because the most famous man in America had just fought for her when nobody else had. Thank you. The words barely escaped her lips. Thank you so much. Elvis smiled. The same smile that had captivated millions. But at that moment, it wasn't the smile of a superstar. It was the smile of a man trying to comfort a frightened teenager. Sit down for a minute. Sarah blinked. What? You look like you're about to collapse. A few customers nearby laughed softly. Even Sarah managed a weak smile. Slowly, she sat across from him. Her legs felt like rubber. Her heartbeat was finally beginning to slow. Elvis remained in his coffee-stained shirt as if it didn't matter. As if none of this mattered. As if she mattered more. What's your name? He asked. Sarah. Sarah Mitchell. Well, Sarah Mitchell. A playful grin appeared. That's one memorable way to introduce yourself. Sarah looked confused. Elvis leaned closer. Do you greet all your customers by baptizing them with coffee? For a moment, she simply stared. Then something unexpected happened. She laughed. A real laugh. The first genuine laugh she'd had all morning. The tension shattered instantly. There she is, Elvis said. That's better. Sarah wiped her eyes. I'm really sorry about your shirt. Elvis glanced down. Oh, this. He tugged at the stained fabric. I've had worse things happen. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Most celebrities would have exploded. Most wealthy customers would have demanded punishment. Instead, he was joking, trying to make her feel better. The realization left her speechless. Then Elvis asked a question that changed everything. How old are you? 18. His eyebrows rose. 18. Sarah nodded. Shouldn't you be in college? The smile disappeared. Instantly, a shadow crossed her face. The question hit an old wound. One she tried not to touch. One she carried every day. Elvis noticed immediately. Something changed in his expression. A quiet understanding. A realization that he'd stepped onto painful ground. I was accepted. The words came out softly. So why aren't you there? Sarah looked down. Because saying it aloud still hurt. Because dreams sound different when they're spoken. More real. More painful. Finally, she answered. My family couldn't afford it. The restaurant noise seemed to fade. For the next several minutes, she told him everything. About her father dying. About her mother working herself to exhaustion. About helping raise 3 younger siblings. About the scholarship that wasn't enough. About the acceptance letter hidden in her dresser drawer. About the dream she'd buried. The dream of becoming a teacher. A dream she'd convinced herself was impossible. Elvis listened without interrupting. Not once. No checking his watch. No looking around. No pretending to care. He genuinely listened. And when she finished, he remained silent. Thinking. Studying her. Then he asked quietly, if money wasn't a problem, what would you do? Sarah answered immediately. The answer had lived inside her heart for years. I'd become a teacher. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Just truth. Elvis nodded slowly. I thought so. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a business card, borrowed a pen, wrote something on the back. The scratching sound seemed unusually loud. Sarah watched in confusion. When he finished, he handed her the card. I want you to call this number tomorrow. She looked at it, then back at him. Why? Ask for Colonel Parker. Sarah frowned. I don't understand. You don't need to. His smile returned. Just call. But promise me. There was something strangely serious in his voice now. Something that made her stop arguing. I promise. Good. He stood. So we're agreed. Sarah stared at the card. Still confused. Still emotional. Still trying to understand why any of this was happening. Then Elvis spoke one final sentence before leaving. A sentence she would remember for the rest of her life. Everybody deserves a chance to chase their dream, Sarah. Then he walked away and disappeared through the restaurant doors. leaving behind a stained shirt, a business card, and a mystery. The next morning, Sarah made the call. Her hands shook the entire time. Part of her expected a joke. Part of her expected disappointment. Part of her expected nothing at all. The phone rang. Once, twice, three times. Then a voice answered. Colonel Parker's office. Sarah swallowed. My name is Sarah Mitchell. Silence. Then, please hold. Her heart began pounding. A minute later, another voice appeared. Older, confident, professional. This is Colonel Tom Parker. Sarah nearly dropped the phone. Elvis told me about you. Everything inside her stopped. He did. Yes. The colonel paused, then delivered a sentence that changed her life forever. Elvis wants your college education fully funded. Sarah blinked. Nothing made sense. I'm sorry. Tuition. A pause. Books. Another pause. Supplies. Another. Whatever is necessary. Sarah's knees gave out. She collapsed into the nearest chair. The room spun. This couldn't be real. It couldn't. There must be a mistake. There isn't. The colonel's voice softened. Elvis believes you deserve an opportunity. Sarah began crying. Not small tears. Not polite tears. The kind that come from years of pressure breaking all at once. Years of sacrifice. Years of disappointment. Years of telling herself dreams weren't meant for people like her. Suddenly, all of it exploded. And for the first time in years, she felt hope. Real hope. The kind she'd almost forgotten existed. In January 1961, Sarah Mitchell walked onto a college campus. The same campus she once believed she would never see. Every class, every book, every exam, every late night, every achievement became proof that one act of kindness could rewrite a future. She graduated in 1965, exactly as she'd dreamed, exactly as she'd promised herself years earlier. And then she became a teacher. Not for 1 year, not for 5, for 35 years. 35 years spent helping children believe in themselves. 35 years spent opening doors for others. 35 years spent changing lives. Hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. Children who would never know their future had been touched by a moment inside a Las Vegas restaurant decades earlier. But the story wasn't finished. Years later, in 1974, Sarah finally managed to send a letter that reached Elvis himself. She thanked him, told him about her classroom, told him about the students, told him about the life he'd made possible. Weeks later, a reply arrived. A real reply. Handwritten. Short. Simple. Powerful. Sarah, I'm glad you became a teacher. The world needs more people like you. Remember what I told you. Everybody deserves a chance. Now you're giving other kids theirs. That makes me proud. Elvis. Sarah framed the note. It hung in her classroom for decades. Every year, students asked about it. And every year, she told the story. Not about the coffee, not about the scholarship, not about meeting Elvis Presley. She told them about kindness, about second chances, about what happens when someone sees your potential instead of your mistake. Because that was the true miracle. The coffee wasn't important. The shirt wasn't important. The fame wasn't important. The miracle was that when Sarah made the worst mistake of her life, someone chose compassion. Someone chose understanding. Someone chose to believe in her future. And that choice didn't just change one life. It echoed through generations, through every child Sarah taught, through every dream she helped build, through every student who went on to change someone else's life. Years later, during her retirement speech, Sarah stood before friends, colleagues, and former students. Her hair had turned grey. Her career was ending. But her voice remained steady. She smiled and said, "The day I spilled coffee on Elvis Presley, I thought my life was over." The audience laughed, then grew quiet. Instead, it was the day my life began. Tears filled many eyes, including hers, because she understood something most people never do. Greatness isn't measured by fame. It isn't measured by wealth. It isn't measured by power. Greatness is measured by what you do when someone vulnerable stands in front of you after making a mistake. You can destroy them, or you can lift them up. On a November morning in 1960, Elvis Presley had every reason to be angry, every reason to think about himself, every reason to walk away. Instead, he looked at a terrified 18-year-old waitress and saw something nobody else saw: potential. And because he chose kindness over anger, a frightened girl became a teacher. A teacher changed hundreds of lives. And one spilled cup of coffee became a legacy that would outlive them both.